London, 1910. The fog hung heavy in Soho, a shroud concealing secrets and sins. Among them was George Gaffney, a petty thief with a heart full of darkness. He moved through the labyrinthine streets with a practiced ease. He knew every twist and turn, every dark corner where shadows whispered. Gaffney was a creature of the night, preying on the unsuspecting and the vulnerable. His morals were as fluid as the smoke curling from his cheap cigarettes. He justified his actions with a cynical shrug and a muttered curse about the world owing him a living. The truth was, he enjoyed the thrill of the steal, the fleeting sense of power it gave him. He cared little for the consequences of his actions, for the fear that gnawed at his victims. One fateful night, Gaffney's path crossed with Bessie Graves, a young woman with eyes full of hope and a future bright with promise. She was a seamstress, her nimble fingers creating beauty from scraps of fabric. Bessie saw something in Gaffney, a flicker of goodness buried beneath layers of grime and deceit. She believed she could save him from himself. Gaffney, in turn, saw in Bessie a means to an end, a way out of the darkness that threatened to consume him. Among Gaffney's meager possessions was a length of silk cord, a gift from a sailor who had traveled to distant lands. It was a thuggy cord, the sailor had explained, used by a secret sect in India to silence their victims swiftly and silently. Gaffney had scoffed at the time, dismissing it as a morbid trinket, yet the cord held a strange allure, its smooth texture a constant temptation. He kept it hidden away, a dark secret coiled at the bottom of his pocket. The cord represented something more than just a tool. It was a symbol of his own capacity for violence, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked within him. It was a line he had never crossed, a boundary he told himself he would never breach. But as his circumstances grew more desperate, the cord whispered promises of swift solutions and permanent silence. Bessie's gentle heart had been won by Gaffney's rough charm, and she had given herself to him with an innocence that both captivated and suffocated him. When she revealed she was carrying his child, Gaffney felt a surge of panic. He was trapped, his freedom slipping away like sand through his fingers. The weight of responsibility was unbearable, the prospect of fatherhood terrifying. The fog was thick the night he led Bessie to the Thames. He told her it was a lover's rendezvous, a secret meeting place beneath the watchful gaze of the city lights. Bessie, blinded by love and trust, followed willingly. As they stood on the riverbank, the dark water swirling at their feet, Gaffney's hand instinctively went to his pocket, seeking the solace of the silken cord. The deed was done swiftly, the silence broken only by the lapping of the water against the pilings. Gaffney slipped the cord from Bessie's lifeless neck and let her body sink beneath the murky surface. He felt no remorse, only a chilling emptiness as he melted back into the fog, leaving behind no trace of his crime. Gaffney knew he had to disappear. He shed his old life like a snake shedding its skin, reinventing himself as Arthur Eames, a man of quiet respectability. He rented a room in a boarding house in Bloomsbury, far from the familiar haunts of Soho. He told himself it was a new beginning, a chance to escape the shadows of his past. But the past, he would soon discover, had a way of catching up. He set his sights on Mrs. Eleanor Sterling, a wealthy widow with a kind heart and a lonely soul. Eleanor, still mourning the loss of her husband, saw in Arthur a charming companion, a kindred spirit. She was drawn to his quiet demeanor, his air of melancholy. Gaffney played the part to perfection, his every word, every gesture calculated to ensnare the unsuspecting widow. He showered her with compliments, regaling her with fabricated tales of his past. He spoke of a tragic love lost, a tale designed to evoke sympathy and understanding. Eleanor, touched by his supposed grief, opened her heart and her home to him. Gaffney, ever the opportunist, saw his chance and moved in for the kill. He proposed marriage, knowing that Eleanor, in her loneliness and naivety, would find it difficult to refuse. Section 5, Whispers from the Grave. His plan, however, was soon to be derailed by a force he couldn't comprehend, Bessie's ghost. It began subtly, whispers in the dead of night, the scent of lavender, Bessie's favorite perfume, wafting through his room. He dismissed them as figments of his imagination, the remnants of a guilty conscience. But the hauntings grew stronger, more persistent. Objects moved in his room, furniture creaking under unseen weight. He would wake in the night, heart pounding, to find the sheets pulled back as if by an unseen hand. He saw fleeting glimpses of Bessie, her face pale and mournful, her eyes reflecting the cold depths of the Thames. She appeared in reflections in shop windows, in the swirling steam rising from his teacup. Her voice, a chilling whisper that sent shivers down his spine, followed him everywhere. It spoke of betrayal, of a love cruelly extinguished, of a life stolen before its prime. Gaffney tried to ignore it, to drown out the spectral voice with alcohol and late nights, but the haunting continued unabated. It was as if Bessie's spirit was tethered to his, a constant reminder of his heinous crime. Section 6. The Unseen Terror. The haunting extended beyond the walls of his room. Gaffney would feel a cold spot behind him in crowded rooms, the temperature plummeting as if a winter wind had swept through. He started seeing Bessie's face everywhere, in the faces of passing women, in the patterns of the wallpaper, even in the flames flickering in the fireplace. His carefully constructed facade began to crumble. He grew withdrawn, his eyes taking on a haunted look. He tried everything to rid himself of Bessie's ghost. He consulted priests who sprinkled holy water and recited prayers, but to no avail. He even sought the help of a charlatan medium who claimed to be able to communicate with the dead. The medium, after a séance that left Gaffney feeling even more unnerved, confirmed his worst fears. Bessie's spirit was indeed haunting him, seeking justice for her untimely demise. The charlatan offered no solutions, only pronouncements of doom and warnings of karmic retribution. Gaffney, desperate, resorted to sleeping with a knife under his pillow, hoping to ward off the spectral presence. But the knife offered no protection against the unseen terror that haunted his waking hours and plagued his dreams. Section 7, Flight to Quebec. Eleanor, sensing his growing unease, attributed his behavior to a bout of melancholia. She fussed over him, urging him to take a holiday, to seek solace in a change of scenery. Gaffney, grasping at straws, decided to flee. He booked passage on a ship bound for Quebec City, hoping that the vast expanse of the Atlantic would be enough to sever the ties that bound him to Bessie's vengeful spirit. He left without a word to Eleanor, abandoning his charade as Arthur Eames as easily as he had embraced it. He told himself it was for the best that he was sparing her from his own personal torment. In truth, he was running not for her sake, but for his own. He clung to the hope that distance would break the curse, that the ocean would swallow his sins and grant him the peace he so desperately craved. The journey across the Atlantic was a torment. The constant rocking of the ship, the cries of the gulls, the vastness of the ocean. Everything served as a reminder of his isolation, of the darkness he carried within him. He barely slept, haunted by nightmares of Bessie's pale face emerging from the depths, her cold hand reaching for him, pulling him down, down, down into the icy abyss. Section 8. The Haunting Across the Ocean. Quebec City, with its cobblestone streets and imposing architecture, offered no respite. Bessie's ghost had followed him, crossing the ocean with the same ease with which it had navigated the streets of London. He found a cheap room in the city's lower town, a warren of narrow streets and dimly lit alleys that reminded him of the Soho he had left behind. The haunting continued unabated. He saw Bessie's face reflected in the icy waters of the St. Lawrence River, heard her whispers in the howling wind that swept down from the north. The cold, which had always been a constant companion, intensified, seeping into his bones, chilling him to the core. He was trapped, his spirit as well as his body imprisoned by the consequences of his actions. He realized that there was no escaping Bessie, no outrunning the consequences of his crime. She would follow him to the ends of the earth, her spectral presence a constant reminder of his guilt. He was a prisoner of his own making, his spirit shackled to hers for eternity. Section 9, Confession and Despair. Driven to the brink of madness, Gaffney stumbled into a police station, his eyes wild with terror. He confessed everything, the theft, the assumed identity, the murder of Bessie Graves. He told his tale in a rambling, disjointed manner, his voice cracking with emotion. He spoke of the haunting, of the relentless pursuit by Bessie's ghost, of the terror that gnawed at his soul. The police, initially skeptical, were struck by the genuine fear in his eyes, the desperation in his voice. They had dealt with their fair share of criminals, but none had ever confessed with such raw emotion, such bone-chilling conviction that they were being pursued by forces beyond the grave. Gaffney was placed in a cell, a bare, cold room with iron bars and a single flickering gaslight. He felt a strange sense of relief, of release. He had confessed, unburdened his soul. Perhaps now finally he would find some measure of peace. But his hope was short-lived. Bessie's ghost, he realized, was still with him, her presence even stronger within the confines of the cell. Section 10. The Missing Cord. He didn't have long to wait for his final reckoning. That night, Gaffney used his own belt, a crude substitute for the silken cord that had sealed Bessie's fate, to take his own life. He was found the next morning hanging from the bars of his cell, his face pale and contorted in a mask of eternal torment. The police, investigating the suicide, were baffled. Gaffney's belt, the instrument of his demise, was gone, vanished without a trace. They searched the cell, the surrounding corridors, even the courtyard outside, but the belt was nowhere to be found. The mystery of the missing belt, coupled with Gaffney's frantic confession of being haunted, sent chills down their spines. Some whispered that Bessie's ghost, having exacted its revenge, had claimed Gaffney's life force as its own and taken the belt as a trophy. Others dismissed it as the ramblings of superstitious minds unable to comprehend the depths of human depravity. Whatever the explanation, the tale of George Gaffney, the Soho Strangler, became a chilling reminder that some sins, even in death, can never be truly forgiven or forgotten.